Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping into something that sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but is actually very real. We're talking about the thrilling and complex intersection of corporate criminal liability and the brave insiders who risk absolutely everything to expose it. When massive companies break the law, how does society actually hold them accountable? And more importantly, who pays the price when the truth finally comes out? It all starts with a central, honestly mind-bending paradox. Think about it. Can a corporation, a literal legal fiction, actually be treated like a criminal? You can't exactly slap handcuffs on a skyscraper, right? A corporation doesn't have hands to commit a crime, and it lacks a human brain to form malicious intent, yet they possess enormous power. So how can something without a mind actually possess a guilty one? Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First, we'll define the corporate criminal and figure out how courts actually prove corporate guilt. Then, we'll pivot to the human element, the whistleblower's dilemma, and look at the legal shields designed to protect them, before finally charting the path forward.
Section 1. The Corporate Criminal. To understand the law today, we really have to rewind back to the industrial boom. This era created massive multinational corporations with unprecedented financial power and, unfortunately, an unprecedented potential for harm. From catastrophic industrial accidents to massive financial frauds, these entities grew to completely dominate our economic sectors.
Which brings us to the core definition of corporate criminal liability, the extent to which a firm can be held liable for the criminal acts of its employees. Now, fundamental criminal law relies on a famous Latin principle, actus non facit reum, nisi mens sit rea. That basically means no crime exists without two things, a guilty act and a guilty mind. The historical challenge for courts was trying to find that guilty mind hidden within a completely faceless business. And this brilliantly illustrates a really crucial distinction we need to make. We're not talking about vocational crimes, like an employee embezzling money or swiping office supplies from their boss. No, we are talking about corporate crimes. This is an entirely different beast. This is when executives break the law for the benefit of the company itself, doing things like committing fraud or hiding environmental damage just to boost profits. Moving on to Section 2, proving corporate guilt. So we know companies can commit crimes for their own gain. But how do courts in common law countries actually pin the blame on an entity that isn't even human? How do they jump the hurdle of that legal fiction? Well, over time, courts in places like the US, the UK, and India came up with three specific legal frameworks to crack this puzzle. We have the identification test, the aggregation test, and the respondeat superior test. Let's break these down because they are just fascinating tools of legal engineering. Now, what's really interesting is this first one, the identification or alter ego test. As Lord Reed famously put it in the Tesco supermarkets case, an executive is functioning like the company, and his thinking is the firm's mentality. The court is literally searching for the directing mind and will of the company. If a top executive commits a crime, their human brain acts as the brain of the corporate body. Boom, their guilt is the company's guilt. Then we have the other two frameworks. The aggregation test is kind of like a giant puzzle. It takes fragmented pieces of knowledge from multiple different employees and combines them to form one single guilty corporate mind, preventing companies from just hiding behind compartmentalized departments. And finally, the respondeat superior test holds companies vicariously liable for agents acting within their employment to benefit the firm. But here's the wild part. Even with these clever tests, companies usually just get slapped with fines. Why? Because, again, you can't exactly lock a corporate entity in a prison cell. Section 3. The Whistleblower's Dilemma. Okay, here is where our narrative takes a very human, very real turn. All those fancy legal theories we just discussed, they are practically useless without hard evidence. Because corporate crimes happen behind closed boardroom doors, they stay completely hidden unless an insider is brave enough to speak up. To really grasp this, we're drawing from some great academic research out of Chhatrapati Shahuji Maharaj University, grounding us in the specific legal and geographical context of India. The Indian corporate environment has witnessed some massive scandals, like the notorious Satyam fraud. Events like that brutally highlight that internal reporting mechanisms aren't just nice to have, they are absolutely essential for survival and public safety. Because let's be real, it's everyday people and investors who pay the ultimate price when companies cheat. Let's move to and see how this builds a really complex, honestly terrifying picture for the insider. On one hand, whistleblowing is this incredible anti-corruption tool. It protects the public interest and ensures transparency. But on the other hand, look at the reality these people face. We're talking about severe potential retaliation, a total loss of privacy, and a massive emotional and psychological toll. That is an unbelievably heavy burden to place on a single employee. Section 4. Protecting the watchdogs. Since the personal risks are just astronomically high, governments and judiciaries have had to step up. We need strong legislative responses designed specifically to shield these vulnerable, brave individuals from the absolute wrath of corporate retaliation. Tracing the evolution of these protections in India, it all started with a Law Commission recommendation back in 2001. But the truly tragic catalyst happened in 2004, with the murder of Satindra Dubey. He was an official who bravely exposed corruption in a major highway project. That grim event forced the government's hand, leading the Supreme Court to mandate an interim protection mechanism, known as the PIDPI resolution. Eventually, a decade later, the Whistleblowers Protection Act of 2014 was enacted, with further amendments proposed in 2015. And the courts have also laid down some incredibly powerful legal precedents. In the R.K. Jain case, the Supreme Court ruled that exposing corruption is a public service, completely protected under the freedom of speech in Article 19. Even more profoundly, in the Manoj Kumar case, the Kerala High Court established that revealing a whistleblower's identity actually violates their fundamental right to life under Article 21 because it directly puts them at risk of physical harm. The courts have essentially tied the act of blowing the whistle directly to fundamental human rights. Finally, Section 5, the path forward. So we've seen the legal frameworks for prosecuting companies, and we've explored the laws meant to protect the insiders who expose them. But if we look really closely at the path forward, there are still some glaring loopholes in this whole ecosystem. So, the crucial point is this. While the laws totally exist on paper, their implementation is heavily flawed. We see immense bureaucratic delays in investigations. There's a massive lack of grassroots awareness about how to even file a protected complaint in the first place. Plus, there is almost zero psychological support. And unlike in some other countries, there's a real lack of financial rewards to offset the incredible professional and personal risks these watchdogs take. Unaddressed retaliation is keeping far too many people completely silent. It really leaves us trying to balance corporate growth with societal justice. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Our current financial penalties, which, let's face it, amount to just a cost of doing business for some, and these developing legal protections truly enough to deter the massive, undeniable power of modern multinational corporations?